Thank you so much for watching. All right, enough pumping up. Let's get straight to it. M.Canavan, a much happier man, talking to us tonight because the party is where he has been for a long time and they finally made a decision and they took a vote and he's happy because he's now got two hands to get into the fight and he'll be a big part of that fight. And I want to say too to you, mate, your performance in the press conference yesterday was the clearest. Anyone from the right of politics for a while has been talking about what the advantages are in where things have landed. So I really enjoyed that communication last night, and I'm buttering you up because, yes, I'm about to play what David Littleproud had to say and get your response to it. Also, Darren Barnett is here. He's from Watson Advisory, and he's a founding partner of them. So, Matt, we know all the arguments against net zero, well prosecuted for everyone listening to us, right? The leader in the same press conference yesterday basically said the Nationals' position is not climate change does not exist and we don't need to do anything. It is we need to do something about emissions, but we're not going to run to be, you know, the teacher's pet like Labor wants to be. Here is what the leader said.
We're not walking away from reducing emissions. We continue to believe that we need to reduce emissions, but we've got to do it in a better, fairer, cheaper way for all Australians. And what we are going to say is that we believe that we can peg ourselves to the rest of the world. We're not going to be a laggard, but we're not going to streak ahead.
So, Matt, once and for all, from your position, standing there arguing all the rest of it, do people need to understand before the Labor BS machine kicks in that the National Party position is not there's no climate change and we don't have to do anything about it?
Well, that's right, Paul, and thanks for buttering me up. But I am a happy man because through the work that myself and Ross Cadell and the leader David Littleproud have allowed us to do, we've united the Nationals Party. It was a unanimous decision yesterday in our party room. So it's a great feeling to feel back together again. As I said yesterday, we've regained our voice, and our job as an opposition is to have a voice, not just be an echo of the government, to take up the contest. Now, on the question you asked, look, I've never been against trying to do things better, more efficient and reduce our emissions over time. Where I jumped off the train here, Paul, is when we got onto this net zero fantasy roller coaster that we could do it by 2050. I just thought that was insane from day one. It was always a marketing pitch, not an engineering plan. And it has been proven to be extremely costly to any country that has taken it seriously. And unfortunately, we have been one of those nations having some of the highest reductions in emissions in the world. That has come at a cost to our energy competitiveness. It has come at a cost of our manufacturing industries. We're losing more manufacturing jobs in the past week, potentially at Tomago. This has got to stop. We've got to regain our energy competitiveness, our prosperity as a nation. We can do that with some reasonable reductions in emissions, but our priority should be, when we come to planning our energy system, is to lower power prices for Australians. That's what we decided yesterday as the Nationals Party. Politics is nothing but really deciding what your priorities are. You have to make decisions and you decide what is the most important thing to you above and all else. And the most important thing for us is to make sure the living standards of Australians get back up. They're back down to 2011 levels now after we dropped net zero. Let's get them back up. Let's get them moving in the right direction. Let's make sure we have good paying jobs in our manufacturing industry. Let's make sure we can defend our nation by having a thriving manufacturing industry. And most of all, let's not just try and self-flagellate ourselves when the rest of the world is not acting. So we've been working very hard on this in the last few months. I know there's been a lot going on here in Canberra, but behind the scenes, the Nationals Party has been meeting every week to finalise this policy and, as I say, eventually get to a unanimous position.
Yeah, so Darren, again, to the politics in and around it, okay? And I know that there are many people, and I'm not saying this about Matt, but I'm saying many people that will write to me and sort of think that the politics of it is very similar to where we were, say, 15 years ago, that essentially there is a movable population where you can get to more than half the population by saying, look, this is a really nice thing, but it's, you know, it's not quite the all-day, everyday priority, right? The politics has changed for a whole bunch of reasons. There is no longer sort of Coke and Pepsi. There's a whole bunch of options that are there and they're all exploiting in lots of different ways that thing. But to my theory, just to my theory, is that when the Nats are where they are, where the Libs end up as they're probably going to end up, how important is it that we get some examples of how they will deal with climate change, not just the step away from this term that in many ways is just emptier and easier to believe in than...
You're allowed to change your mind, and that's what the Nationals have done, and that's okay. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to take that to an election. But I think a lot of voters, they thought that maybe the climate wars were over, that maybe we'd put that behind us. That doesn't mean that if the Nationals and potentially the Liberals come up with a range of policies that can convince enough people that is the way forward, they can win an election, maybe not the next one, but the one after. All of that is on the table and you can change your mind. But I think we're getting to a point where the investment that's been made is so significant, it does become more difficult to backtrack out of it. And people will look at it and they'll say, well, Malcolm Turnbull was a fan, Scott Morrison was a fan. The last election was pretty solid support in terms of Labor over the coalition. I thought we'd put this to bed. And so I think there's a lot of work needs to be done by the coalition to try and convince people that we need to revisit this. It's easier for the Nationals because regional Australia, I think, has a different view of renewables to the cities. But the job of Susan Lee and the job for the Liberals convincing metropolitan seats that if they're going to form a government as a coalition, that they're going to do that with half of the coalition not supporting net zero, it makes the next election very, very difficult.
But sorry, Matt, you can respond.
And as I said, Matt's allowed to, they're allowed to have a different view.
But the tag I put on that, though, is if, as Little Proud has said, if they've gone in the past and they say, well, look, on the subject of climate change, we think, we think we should do this, right? Like, as I say, a billion trees, making it easy to insure something in an area that might be affected by flood and fire. Then at least there's a response. So to the thing here, Matt, where you know what Labor's going to do, right? Which is that until there is the detail behind what the plan is, then Labor's just going to turn around and make up that, net zero equals climate change, not backing net zero equals not caring about climate change. And we see that basically the BS they pulled off on Medicare, they will weaponise and do again now on this. And I don't want that to happen because it was a lie then and it'll be a lie around the corner too.
Well, Paul, what we are doing is something we've successfully done before. So we can point to experience here and contrast that with the failure that the Labor Party has presided in their own climate policy. What we are saying is let's re-establish something called the Emissions Reduction Fund. A lot of you might not know about it, but that's because when policies work well, you tend not to read much about them, right? You only really find out about pink bats and school halls when everything goes wrong. We had, when we were in government, something called the Emissions Reduction Fund. It actually reduced emissions by 81 million tonnes. It did so at an average price of around $12 a tonne. That's about a third of what the current carbon price is. The Labor Party's net zero plan, in their own projections, shows carbon pricing is going to $300 a tonne to get to net zero. And so that's the contrast. We can do this by working with businesses, by encouraging investments that increase efficiency without punishing people for creating wealth. The Labor Party's plan is effectively a punishment mechanism. So if you create wealth, if you're in an industry that creates jobs, you've got to pay something called a safeguard mechanism, which means you have to reduce your emissions 5% a year. You have to go out and buy carbon credits. That's a carbon tax. We would get rid of those taxes. We don't believe in taxing the Australian community until morale improves and net zero, we get to net zero. That is ridiculous. And in terms of what was said just before, well, look, we're back here fighting these issues only because the Albanese government has failed. I mean, if their net zero plan had done what they said it would do and lower power prices by $275, create 600,000 jobs. Their plan, 100%. Go back and look at their modelling, said 604,000 jobs would be created in hydrogen and critical minerals and all these things. If they'd done that, I wouldn't be here, Paul. I'd be completely discredited. I'd have to walk out this place with my tail between my legs because they have succeeded. And so I don't accept that the Australian people think this is all settled. It's certainly not settled for those people that are struggling to pay their energy bills right now. It's certainly not settled for those 1,000 Tomago workers who are facing an uncertain future when they were promised just at the start of this year. Anthony Albanese went up to Tomago 9 months ago and used them as a prop to launch his political campaign, saying that we would make things in Australia from green energy. And now they're facing a loss of their jobs. That's why this debate is continuing, only because of the Labor Party's failures.
100%. Let's move to the home insurance part of it here, right? Which is, now again, hardly scientific but worth noting, okay? 3 out of 4 Australians are worried that storms, fires and floods will make their home insurance premiums skyrocket in the next 12 months. The source, read a poll on 9.com.au, okay? Ponds Institute level stuff, right? But still. It's a poll worth discussing. The fresh fears come as more than half of those surveyed have already seen their premiums spike in Australia's increasingly wild weather. Now, again, I'm not going to play the Adam Bant of it. I refuse to fall into every fire, every flood, every issue, automatically proof thereof. Right? There were Titanic moments, whether we like it or not, about bushfires a few years ago, smoke, and that was a big moment.
Yeah, Menindee Lakes 2019 election was very much...
Because you could see it.
And the smoke was over the major capitals, particularly Sydney, for sure.
But something also people can see is that one of the biggest drivers of inflation in Australia right now is insurance. And I'm not just talking about, the second car and the boat. We're talking about the house. And if you live in one of the areas that have been affected, either previously hardcore or they draw up a map and think one day, this is very expensive.
It is expensive.
Yet no one wants to touch this because it's the market doing what the market does.
Well, they tend to insure by postcode, and if the postcode has been affected, whether or not your property was individually affected,
correct,
the premiums go
the high bit of Taree or the low bit of Lismore, they're all counted the same. Yeah.
Good luck. And there are probably already postcodes that are uninsurable. And so that then gets aggregated across the board. But look, weather events... they come and go, I accept that, but there have been plenty of them, and we'll never know whether insurance companies are gouging or whether this is a realistic mapping of what the future looks like. But those prices are going to continue to go up, and I think that's irrespective of who's in government. So it's going to be a part of life for whoever's in government, really trying to manage that.
But also, Matt, the too clever by half is there are more people than ever before, more homes than ever before, which means there are more people who eventually end up in the risk areas because that's what they can afford, that's where they choose, all the rest of it here. But again, in our national conversation, there's never a question about this in question time. There's not an inquiry about it. No, because it's just, that's just one of the things. I mean, today they were willing to blow their top at Optus, but I didn't see anyone blowing their top about insurance, and I know which one actually keeps people up at night at the moment.
The real cost driver of insurance premiums, Paul, is inflation. I mean, your premium is going to be set by an insurance company based on how much it costs to replace your home, to replace your goods, or replace your car that you might lose. And the reality is all those things have gone up in the last few years. I mean, how much is it costing to buy things? That's why it's a big driver in the last few years that we haven't had massive storms or anything in the last few years, or cyclones. Cyclones are going down in this country. That's what's driving it. And that's why this energy cost blowout we've seen under this government is so costly, because it affects everything. It's not just your electricity bill. It affects the price of concrete. It affects the price of steel. It affects, therefore, the price of rebuilding a home. It affects everything, and it then flows through to your insurance premiums too.
All right. Thank you, mate. See, I love it. I love a good adult conversation, one everyone can hack and be involved in, butt it up or not. We'll see you again next week, lads. That's our Monday panel, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Darren. Thank you very much, Senator. All right. Now,